Hey everyone, this is Cameron from Renegade Animation on renegadepopculture.com. If you like what we do, please give us a like, a follow, and a rating on Apple Podcasts and wherever you listen to us. We are everywhere. That way we can keep talking about what we love, and that's just gushing over Wendell Wild. And now, on with the show.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Renegade Animation on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. I'll be your host this evening. Joining me, as always, is the animation guru himself, Cameron.
Howdy, howdy.
And today's episode is a special one, not just because it happens to fall on my birthday, but we are talking about the new Netflix stop-motion animated feature, Wendell and Wild. And one of our friends just happens to have been involved in the production. Please welcome our good buddy, Aaron Clausen.
How's it going, everybody? My name's Aaron. You can call me Aaron if you've seen enough Key and Peele sketches. But yeah, I was a junior assistant camera person on Wendell and Wild.
Now, I have to ask the very obvious question. What was it that got you into, we'll say animation in general, but specifically stop motion?
Specifically stop motion? I mean, I guess probably like a lot of people, I grew up, watching Nightmare Before Christmas. Wallace and Gromit was big when I was a kid. Yeah, and it really wasn't until probably the 1-2 punch in 2009 of Coraline and Fantastic Mr. Fox. I was going into middle school around that time. So it just hit at a perfect point where I was like, yeah, I want to do that. There's just something about stop motion that just looks, so unique. Or it feels tactile, like it's animation, but I can touch it. And I think that's kind of where I think I first fell in love with stop motion more than anything else, was probably Coraline and Fantastic Mr. Fox. And then ever since that day, I was like, I want to work in stop motion. And fortunately enough, was able to kind of sneak in there during a pretty insane time for stop motion animation. 3 stop motion features going on at the same time and all in one location in Portland, Oregon.
That's crazy.
It is.
Yeah, talking to people who've been in the industry much longer than I have, a lot of people wound up being like, yeah, this has never happened before. This is a pretty rare time. So it was an opportune moment to sneak in and try to get my foot in the door, I guess.
Well, it's like stop motion takes forever to craft, any animation out there. And to have so many in this year alone is a bit nuts. Like we've had Mad God, Oink. Then we have the upcoming Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. And
don't forget The House that came out in January.
Yeah, The House. And then last year when we had the 2 different Aardman's Christmas specials.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see it have a resurgence. And yes, like everyone, I wish it was all viewable and watchable in a theater, but unfortunately, the Hollywood industry is just like, no, nobody wants to see stop motion in theaters. And it's just like, man, I was at Animation is Film when I saw Wendell and Wild last week. It was amazing. People loved it. Mm-hmm. Just bring it back.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's crazy how much stop motion, one of my coworkers who was all that, Jurassic Park was going to be CG. So they all kind of just would, stop motion was done. They all thought it was just going to die. But it's crazy, this many years later, it's almost more popular than it's ever been. We had 5 stop motion features in 1 year. We had, Oni Thunder God on Netflix as well, which was a mini series. I know Apple TV is working on a stop motion TV show right now.
It's nice to see it have a resurgence because after the Leica films started doing terrible at the box office and no one went to see Early Man because it came out so close to Black Panther. Mm-hmm. And I'm not blaming anyone who went to see Black Panther instead. It's a great movie. But I loved seeing the stop motion stuff. And sometimes, yes, it's how distributors handle releases and such. I think Lionsgate did not do a good job with the Shaun the Sheep films, which made sense why Netflix got the Farmageddon one. Mm-hmm. But it's just I want more of this stuff. And I'm glad to see it continuing. And then in Japan, I know we got the Rila Kuma and Kaoru series from 2019 and 2022 from this year. It's just cool to see it make a comeback. And I hope more companies find time to actually invest into it. I know it's going to cost a lot of money, but you're going to have to spend money to make any movie. So
it was pretty cool to see, Netflix put Wendell in theaters, even if for a little bit, because even when we were on Wendell, none of us knew that it was actually going to go into theaters until maybe about a month and a half after principal photography had wrapped. So we all just assumed it was going straight to Netflix until they finally announced that it was going into theaters.
Oh, wow.
I mean, same thing with Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. I don't think anybody really realized it was going. We assumed it would go to theaters, but it wasn't really until the trailer dropped that they announced it was going in theaters. Pretty cool to see, at least some level of, look at this stop motion we made. Here it is in theaters.
I wish they had a little bit of a longer run in the theatrical release and such. Like, I get why. It's just like they want to qualify for awards and such and whatever, but like give it like 2 weeks or like at least a month and actually advertise it. Netflix. And people like do want to see this stuff. Like I think this year has shown that while like the big tentpole films have done well, everyone has gravitated towards something different. And I feel like Wendell and Wild would have been another example of one of those films that people are like actually craving. Because I'm not saying like the Marvel films did badly or anything. They're not like, oh, they died in the box office or whatever. But they didn't do as well as you think they would have. And whether that's just some outside sources or changing of the times of like what the audiences want, it's time to like be a little weird, be a little wild.
I think the plethora of, good reviews and good audience response to something like Wendell and Wild proves that, there's a hunger for it, especially, and I think it especially would have done pretty well in theaters, just, given Jordan Peele's name attached to it and the fact that this was Henry Selick's first film in 13 years.
God.
That's still crazy to think about.
That's insane.
And I mean, like, I know he was working on that other film that Pixar and Lasseter destroyed for no reason.
I've seen some of that.
Yeah, I saw some of the test footage and it looked amazing. And I'm glad that he bought the rights back. But now I'm like, okay, now tell investors that you got another movie and you want to make it. And they should just be like, okay. Like, stop beating around the bush, Hollywood. Just make more stop motion. I think let's talking about the film in question, Wendell and Wild. A teenage girl named Kat, who's voiced by Lyric Ross, who has a tragic childhood of her parents dying in a car crash. And when she's a teenager going to this boarding school, encounters her own personal demons of Wendell and Wild, voiced by Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele. And, shenanigans ensue with whatever's going on around the town and what she has to do to deal with these demons of hers. I saw it in a big screen. I was at Animations Film. I'm sure you have to take festival reactions with a grain of salt sometimes. But this is one of those films that I just love. It's one of my favorite films of the year so far. And yeah, I just think everyone needs to see it. It's one of those films that you do need to see it.
This might be an unpopular opinion, especially because I'm still riding the high from this movie, but I have this on my list a little bit higher than Nope. But I may be biased because while this isn't like a musical per se, there's a musical element to it, at least in terms of the soundtrack. And another question I have for you is, first of all, how deep into production did you jump onto this one?
I jumped on in May of 2021, which was about like halfway into its production. I know there was a production stall when COVID first hit. They sent a lot of people home for a couple months and then started up again. And then there was fires in the area that stalled it out again. But so I would say I jumped on in about the last like half. A majority of that movie I was able to I'd seen most of, if not all of the sets that were in there, at least built at one point. There's a couple scenes that that was before my time there. But for the most part, I think I was in at least every unit.
So since you handled, you were a camera assistant, what does that entail? Like, what was your job?
So in stop motion, it's a little different than live action. The position of assistant camera person isn't really the same, especially because, we don't need to slate anything. So for, listeners who don't really know how stop motion production works, essentially you can film it all at the same time. So we had a pretty huge warehouse, and that warehouse was split into little sections. So there was about 25 curtained off little units, and every unit had a separate stage. That amount of stages happening at the same time makes it a little tricky for just like one director of photography to go in and film absolutely everything on their own. So they have a team of what's called LCs, or lighting camera people, that are essentially like mini DPs that take their own sequences and their own sets in the film. The DP still has like the overall, this is what this should look like, along with the director. The LCs then kind of have their own little sequences and sets, and then each LC has their own grip gaffer, their own motion control operator, and their own assistant camera person. So I was kind of brought on as like a floater assistant camera. So I would kind of bounce between all of the LCs, which is why I was able to kind of see everything. And then that job is basically setting up cameras, helping our animators with the drag and frame software that we use to capture the images. I would maintain the testing stages and set up lights and cameras in those areas. That's where we would test like practical gags or how much the puppets could move, calisthenics tests and stuff like that. It's a lot of setting up cameras and a lot of making sure that lenses were clean and stuff didn't catch on fire on sets.
That's very cool because I feel like even though it's animation, stop motion has its own like workflow of how things are done. Like this movie looks amazing. And I know when I was at Animation is Film, Henry Selick was like, we could have polished everything out, but we like those little flaws and those little oddities with stop motion. Like, for example, you can see the little line that separates like the different, like, did they use
plates,
the face plates? And I like that because on one hand, it's like, yeah, that gives it the charm, but I also like maybe overthinking it. It's like when you see Father Best, who's voiced by James Hong, who was great in this movie.
Oh yeah, great performance there.
And it's like I kind of see it as like a mask per se, because he wants the school to do well, but he's also mingling with the people who want to make a prison out of the town and such. So it's like a mask per se that he's putting on.
Oh, for sure.
And I like all the little details of like how his, like in his office, the glass window behind him is broken because he's in a broken system. Or that's how I at least look at it. And so like, did you get to like animate anything at all? Or was it just making sure everything looked good and such? Like the cameras were in the right place and such.
Didn't do any of the actual physical animation, thank goodness, because it would have looked awful had I had. We had much more talented teams of animators in charge of that sort of stuff. But no, it was pretty much just setting up the cameras, making sure the shots were getting done. So I was just all behind the camera type stuff.
Nice. So did they use like different size puppets or models or something for?
That's what I want to know, because I saw like in the credits they had like a few behind the scenes photos.
I shot one of those time lapses.
Oh, nice.
There's one where one of our animators, his name is Matthias, was taking Wendell Wild down the steeple of the chapel, and then they fall on the ground and roll and see the freshly dug grave. I was like, I shot that time. I set up the camera for that time lapse.
Nice.
And then I had no idea it was going to end up in the credits, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Puppet size. Yeah, each puppet was probably around like 12 inches tall, 14 inches tall on their own, just like the main hero puppets.
Yeah.
Then obviously there was scale puppets for different reasons. So like there's a shot of the brewery. It's Kat looking at the brewery and her vision goes like, all this is what it used to look like before it shows the burnt down brewery. And there are these little quarter scale puppets that are being used that have like, you almost can't animate them at all. If you really watch that scene and look closely, you'll see that they're not really doing much outside of just like shifting back and forth. So we had miniature versions of a lot of the puppets. Belzer made it so that there needed to be a lot of scale. So when Belzer's in his little lake and stuff, that puppet's probably only like 12 inches long. But then when it's close up on his like belly or top of his head or something like that, the belly was just like a whole set, 5 foot by 5 foot set, maybe even bigger than that actually. And then the hands, because the puppets were like 12 inches tall, and you can see this in the end credits too, the like big hands, there was 2 of them, were probably 9 feet tall if you stood them up straight.
Golly.
And the craziest part is they were fully animatable. Like you could move each finger individually and it was pretty insane how it was built.
Did they use like a wireframe kind of model for those, or was it something like animatronics or something like how they would do old like visual effects and such for like 80s monster movies and what have you?
I think it was a combination of both. It definitely had like a frame, but at the same time, I knew, especially for any of like the wrist motions, it was connected to motion control robots that would kind of like shift it on its own, or at least help the animator shift it.
I see. So did they have to go like little, like frame by frame, like move it a little at a time, like when they're using
Oh
like
yeah,
the big hands?
and luckily in stop motion, you can control every individual frame. Sometimes it would take, like 5 minutes just to reset everything before the second picture gets taken. And then, so if a shot's like, we think about everything in frames. So if a shot's like 120 something frames long and it's a pretty complex shot, it could take an animator like a whole week just to do that 2 second, 3 second shot.
What would you say are like some of the one of the more difficult shots in the film?
For me personally, or one I would guess.
If you had to guess, but maybe one that you were kind of overseeing that day.
If I had to guess, just like overall, there's a scene where Belzer, both of his hands are in frame at the same time, and so both giant hands were used, where he takes the carriage that they're all kind of using to get away down the mountain, and he like pours Wendell Wild onto his other hand and like just tosses the thing. That just motion of taking both hands and trying to drop characters into the other hand, because characters would have to be airborne in between there, so they had to be rigged to be able to fall, as well as at both hands having to be rigged in a way that they could move over top of each other. Was probably pretty insane. Just all the screamfare stuff was pretty nuts, because the camera was just going everywhere, so
Right,
not to break anything.
Like a chaotic version of one of those roller coaster tycoon games.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
That's what I thought when I saw the two roller coasters crash into one another, and it's like, there we go.
Sure.
And I know, like Henry Selick said at the festival, that there was one sequence that they had to cut because like they weren't going to be able to do it. Was when you actually got to see all of Buffalo Belzer like above the ground and such, and
oh sure.
And I get that. It's like because you only see him in the his lake or hot tub or whatever it is, and then you only see like the upper half.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that would have just been a nightmare in a handbasket to make work. But he didn't seem all that like he didn't really regret it. It sounded like, because it's whatever told the story better. And if he felt like that wasn't going to help the story at all,
thank goodness don't see any of his under his belly, because in that shot where he's like stuck in the ground, that's all there is of that puppet. Like, so if you were to pan the camera down under the set, it's just no legs and a whole bunch of like metal gears that are all able to like move his gut.
I was gonna ask, is there anything under that set except for just like wires or whatever?
Yeah, no, it's just a whole bunch of rigging gear and gears and movable stuff. So like one of the animators could just move just the belly individually, which was pretty funny.
Interesting to see, because I love seeing all those behind the scenes stuff in like Leica or Aardman. It's just really cool. And like I took some stop motion classes way back in the day, and I was always amazed of like when we would watch stuff like the Aardman stuff or the Reagan Bass stuff. It's just impressive to like see all that stuff, because I think people would want to see that, because a lot of times like filmmakers will make a big deal about like, oh, look at this technological advancement we made. Like Monsters Inc. had like the fur technology, and then of course James Cameron of Avatar was just like, I'm going to make you feel like you live in this world.
What's crazy about Wendell Wild, especially in comparison to other modern day stop motion films, is like, not scared is the wrong word, but how adamant it was to make just about everything you saw on screen practical. It's shocking just to see how much of that movie is like was done via practical effects versus like other stop motion films. You look at the behind the scenes of Kubo, lots of practical stuff, but like there's also a lot of synthetic CG work done in those films, where this one, outside of like the sky and just some set extensions. Most of this was all practical effects in some way.
That's amazing. I know Selleck likes to be old school with stop motion, so that makes a lot of sense that he would want to use as little CGI as possible.
What I was wondering is with the 2D animation, that you see mostly in like the flashbacks and the visions of the future.
Sure.
Was that all practical too? Like using mostly like shadows and stuff?
So that sequence on its own in the Redemption's Chamber is like kind of a hybrid. That was one of the only ones that was pretty CG done, but at the same time, a lot of that stuff, some of the stuff that wasn't like quite as like sharper, sharp image type stuff, like was done with sort of the techniques that he was using for the Shadow King. There was a lot of shadow play in this movie, but that sequence specifically was kind of a hybrid of the shadows, and then once it like moved into the whole green world, that was CG.
Oh, I see.
Some of the ones that you wouldn't expect to be like practical, but were, are Wendell and Wild's floating heads were practically done. That like whirlpool was all practically done that she was standing in her dream. All the water was practically done, including the bubbles. The lightning was all practically done.
Golly.
Wow.
That's one thing I really liked about the animation and the visual style for this was the different iterations of Wendell and Wild themselves. Because when they were in like hell, they stayed with the more caricature look that Pablo Lobato, like who was a caricature artist, and this was his first time working on an animated feature. Like he would keep Wendell and Wild's heads at a very like flat perspective, even if their entire bodies were like 3-dimensional and such. And then the whole dream sequence of when Kat meets Wendell and Wild, they have more of a stretchy pseudo Aardman kind of look to how they move their mouths and such. And then when they are up in the human world, that's when they still have their distinct visual look, but they have like a more, it's going to sound weird saying this, human look.
Sure. Yeah. When they get dressed up to be morticians.
Yeah, they mortician magicians. Now, like, were you there like during the process of when they were crafting any of the puppets? Like, did you get to see like different iterations of them? Or
one of the things that I was fortunate enough to do was I operated a lot in the test units. So some of the earlier hero puppets, like in more main characters, were pretty well finished by the time I had gotten there. But the puppet department was still like a department when I started there, working on other puppets and costumes and stuff. So a lot of the undead brewery workers, I got to see renditions of those. All of the old guard skeletons, I got to see a lot of renditions of those. I have a selfie with one that I want to post. One of the coolest ones was the eels that are in the Scream Fair for just a little bit.
yeah,
When the souls get dropped from the Ferris wheel and like electric shock by the eels, also practically done. The first rendition of those, the eels were purple, not green. So I have photos of those too that I'll probably post at some point. But yeah, so I got to see like something go from an entirely purple thing to now entirely green. Being able to work in the test units was pretty cool because you got to see a lot of the rough drafts and a lot of the stuff that didn't work and didn't make it into the film. So it was cool to see the stuff that like didn't make it.
Because like I'm looking at some of the 2D concept art for some of the characters like Kat and Raul, and they look amazing. I love this look, and you can see why this guy's worked in like magazines and
oh sure,
oh yeah,
and it's really cool that they were able to translate that visual look to 3-dimensional puppets, because I feel like sometimes when you draw something really cool, or at least this was a thing back then, like you'd have a cool stylized look and it wouldn't quite translate as well as you would think it would. I've seen a lot of CGI animated features where it's like, I wonder if this looked better on paper.
Sure.
And I mean, now that we're like moving past like with the Peanuts movie, Spider-Verse and whatever, we're now at that point where we can do more stylized looks. And that's cool to see it happen in stop motion because this movie has such a cool look to it.
It really does.
I loved all of the little designs for everyone, and the 2 nuns that Father Best describes as the penguins.
Yes.
Are very cool. The pointed look on their faces, and it's a cool looking movie. And Like, were there any moments where they had to use CGI that it was like, we can't get around using practical stuff? Because I know that's always like something that stop motion has to struggle with, where it's like they can't do water in a very sensible way, where I know like Kubo and whatnot would use like not full on CGI, but some kind of practical thing to like put the puppets on and what have you and such.
I mean, outside of just that redemption chamber real like flashback thing, not really. I mean, you bring up the water from Kubo, but here a lot of the water was all practically done, or at least the effect was practically done. So we had like some like mylar sheets type stuff that we would put over these plastic lines that were all spaced apart, and you could kind of move the lines individually so it would create kind of a ripple looking effect. And then you just light it the right way to make it look like water. So that opening shot of the movie when you're pushing into the brewery, you can see some of that water there that's like reflective, and that's practical. The underwater sequences, they did something called blur motion. So essentially the camera was hooked up to a robot, and the animator would, hit the button to take the picture. But then the camera would move really quickly forward and really quickly backwards. So stuff was still sort of in focus, but there was like just a hint of blur to it. And they'd kind of comp the still image and the blurred image together to kind of make that underwater perspective look. So even that was practically done. Or the water coming in through the window, I think, was just like saran wrap.
Oh my gosh.
And then the one that just like blows my mind is even the bubbles were all practical. So we would shoot it against like glass. They would take what was called museum gel, which was like kind of an animatable like clear gel. They would set it on glass and shoot it against a black backdrop, and then the animator would have scene on screen so they could see kind of where to put the bubbles, and then the bubbles would just get comped into the frame. So even the bubbles were practical.
So even Angela Bassett's character, Sister Helly, and her little shadow movements, was that all practical? Like when she would like sink into the ground and then like move across to get to places faster and such.
I think the lights were, but I think the smoke effect was added after the fact. They tried early tests way back then, like before I had gotten there. They were saying they tried some smoke effects that weren't quite working in the way they wanted to, because unfortunately with stop motion you have to have some sort of at least a little bit of a repeatable action. Otherwise, like, you can't do it again if you need to shoot any sort of plates.
Understandable. That's very impressive to hear how much practical. It sounds like it was basically 99.9% practical.
Pretty crazy.
So like even when they were doing stuff like Buffalo Belzer's insides and such were big sets also?
Yeah, so all of Belzer's inside stuff, that was actually the only stuff that in the movie that I'm aware of, at least, that was shot live action. So the souls themselves were shot stop motion and were animated, but the big intestines and, you know, butthole and everything,
I got a huge kick out of that one. Like, I forgot that I saw it in the theaters, and then when you brought it up, I was like, wait, what? And then I watched it a night ago and I was like, oh my god, there is one.
So those intestines were, we had like a red camera and we shot all that live action, and all the like bounciness of the foam and stuff was just all puppeteered by people on the crew, like just poking at it basically to make it look like the guts were bubbling. But yeah, those were all just like made of foam and then shot live action, which is pretty crazy. So there was a little bit of puppeteering in the movie.
That's really wild. Again, like, and it's also wild that this is a PG-13 film.
I actually didn't realize that until I started watching like interviews today. It makes sense thematically why this would be PG-13, but in my mind, I was also thinking like, yeah, this is something I could see watching when I was younger alongside like Ghostbusters or Beetlejuice or like the Addams Family movies. It seems like right in that kind of mold.
Like really, it's more PG-13 because of I would argue it's thematic elements more than violence, because they're pretty, I don't mean this as a negative thing, like safe. Like they cut away when the two villains strike Father Best with the golf club. Like you don't see it actually hit him. It's done like via shadows and such. There's only maybe like one or two moments of where there was actually cursing. I just thought that was neat that it was PG-13. Was that always like a thing before or while you were there? They're like, yeah, it's just going to be PG-13. Deal with it.
I mean, I always kind of figured it was going to be PG-13, mostly because I wasn't sure how much of a puppet's undercarriage you could show on screen and get away with PG. Like, nobody knew that it was going to be officially PG-13, but a lot of us that were working on it kind of assumed it would be, or at least, really pushing the boundary of PG.
I mean, that's cool because we do need those. Not everything has to be G or PG with animation. And
sure,
unfortunately, it seems like every other time we try to do that, like a PG-13 and such, either nobody shows up, like for 9, for example, or we get Sausage Party, which does really well critically and financially, and then the nonsense happened with them abusing their workers and such. And it's like, well, shoot, back to square one again.
Yeah, pretty crazy to see. It was like, as far as I'm aware too, it was pretty cool to see Netflix kind of give Henry free reign of the project and just kind of whatever he wanted to throw in there was going to make it into the movie.
So that's a question I have. How much was Netflix a part of the project besides like quarterly check-ins or whatever of like, how's the budget going and whatever, or like, did they try to slip as many notes as possible to y'all, or was it like, oh yeah, here's a note, then you toss it in the fire and be like, now then?
I mean, that sort of stuff's probably above my pay grade, but as far as I'm aware, or at least like stuff that I've heard from other people, it really was like Henry and Jordan made their movie sort of thing. I don't remember really. I mean, we were Netflix Animation, so, I was employed by Netflix Animation. It wasn't like employed by somebody else and like Netflix was distributing it. So it was a Netflix production, but I don't ever remember seeing Netflix producers pop through. I mean, like the Monkey Paw producers came to set, but I don't think I ever saw anybody from Netflix really hop in.
I know that's like a big fear in like the horror stories that you hear with like producers coming in and being like, okay, hey, stuff like this, we want that, and or this or that or what have you. I mean, that's what I keep hearing about a lot of these productions before Netflix took a hard left turn at the beginning of the year, was that they went to everyone and said, what is something that you want to make that studios would hinder your production of? That's what I heard from Jorge Gutierrez when he was making Maya and the 3.
Sure.
Was that like, make something that studios would not touch. And so that's reassuring to mostly hear that Selleck and Peele got to make what they wanted.
Kind of felt like that on set too. It was like there were times where one of our LCs or DP would come in and just, end up being like, well, I don't know, we'll figure out if this works, I guess. You got to, just try to do something that they might not have on another set, and just Henry just rolled with it.
It was a very like complex film to watch, just thematically, with how it was dealing with like family, the disconnect that some like siblings and parents have, dealing with like your personal demons / your like Psychonauts would say, everyone has a little personal baggage.
Yep.
And then commentating on how the prison system is corrupt and how these rich monsters, the actual demons, like quote unquote, would take advantage of a small town that's in like economic strife and then be like, oh yeah, we'll do this. And then like basically make sure no one gets a good start. It's
really insane to just how much stuff is going on in this movie, because you can describe it as, a drama against the private prison industrial complex, but it's also a comedy about male pattern baldness. It's insane.
That's what makes us the perfect combination of both Selleck and Peele's creative aesthetics. Something I learned, again, watching a bunch of interviews, is that he and Peele were in talks to join this film like long before Get Out was even released, which I think is pretty cool. It's kind of funny though to think of Henry Selick as like an avid Key and Peele fan. I really can't think of, like, now that I've seen the film, anyone else who would have been better suited for the titular roles.
As far as I know, like I've heard, Henry really wanted to find or just make some sort of modern day Abbott and Costello type of a vibe. So, Key and Peele were kind of just the perfect choice for that.
At Animation is Film, he was like, yeah, a huge fan. And it took until like season 3 of Key and Peele to finally get in contact with him and say like, hey, you want to be a part of this movie? And Key and Peele were huge animation fans, especially stop motion, which is, again, all of the people working in the Hollywood entertainment industry are probably big nerds like the rest of us. So it was very cool to hear that they were like super ecstatic about doing this. And like their comedy is very on point. I loved Keegan being like the more stern, responsible one, while Peele was the more aloof one. And just did you ever find out, or like did you ever talk to someone who was in charge of like the hair gel stuff? Like, what was with the hair gel? I get it, like it's a temporary fix to a long-term issue kind of theme.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know why thematically or, literally why it was hair gel that was chosen, but I mean, I know they made a lot of them on set. There is not just one of those tubes. I know in the movie it's like, oh, I used it all up, but I was like, well, I remember on set there was definitely like at least a dozen more of those.
I love that little detail because I do think thematically it is. They're trying to find a temporary solution for a long-term problem. And it's like, yes, they would bring people back to life, but as we see throughout the film, the hair falls and then the bodies fall.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing we haven't addressed, for those who don't know, the majority of the film takes place in an all-girls school. There's one boy, a trans character named Raul. When you saw that in the script, what were your first impressions of it? Because I thought watching this, like, wow, this is really great representation that we just have a trans character just existing in the film.
Well, not just existing, like an actual lead player in the main story.
Yeah, he's like a core member of the ensemble.
Was pretty blown away in terms of the representation and diversity in this film. And at no point did it ever feel like they were Tolkien characters. It was like they were just, there, and it wasn't, and nobody made like a huge deal about it. It was representation done right, I think. It wasn't like flipping characters that already exist. It was all original characters that just work really well together.
Yeah, or they weren't like shoved into the background for like 1 second.
It wasn't any like 1 second kiss off screen way in the back.
Yeah, like Disney, come on, man. You got outshone about representation, and now there's no excuse anymore of how they handle it. Cool, I loved Raul. I thought he was a good character, and I really liked the entire like overall cast. I mean, you had your straightforward villains with Siobhan's parent who ran the whole prison. It sounds weird and terrifying to say it, franchise.
Yes.
And I actually got to see Tamara Smart, who plays her, at the festival screening. But there's more like nuance per se with all the characters. Like Kat's like vulnerable but very stoic and doesn't really want to be bothered or messed with. It was kind of cool and interesting to see how Wendell and Wild, they do see her in that whole dream sequence and beforehand when they're getting high off of the hair gel because it tickles their tummies. But they don't really interact until like into the second act of the film, or like because of shenanigans, they end up in the wrong area and then bring back Father Best's. Because I was thinking like, oh, Kat's going to have to deal with them at all times. But Wendell and Wild were very much not attached to the hip to Kat. And like Siobhan was like a preppy snob student, but she wasn't like outwardly malicious, or as malicious as a lot of productions would probably make her. I liked Sister Helly. Like I thought Angela Bassett, she was great. And the janitor was a delight. I love that little detail that he has fake feet.
Yeah, Manberg.
Yeah, Manberg, who was voiced by Egal Naor. Like, I think like maybe outside of Sloane and Sweetie, who were just kind of the friends to Siobhan. Sure. But even then, I still thought they had distinct personalities. They weren't just token characters.
Yeah, no, for better or worse, this movie has a lot of moving parts, but I really loved how all the characters, even if they were just acting on their own little individual paths, like had pretty beginning, middle, and end arcs. Even if, they're like some were shorter than others, all the characters in the movie felt pretty complete.
I understand some of the criticism saying it's a bit overstuffed. I get that, but I thought they, for the most part, handled pretty much everything well, and I didn't really feel like they left anything hanging because, like, you would hear like the Demon Collection, oh, that pays off later.
Mm-hmm.
A busy story, but one that was still fairly well focused.
I would have to agree with that. I get they did try to cram in like a lot of material, but at no point did I ever feel like taken out of the movie at any point. I was engaged pretty much throughout the whole thing.
I'm just saying, if you want to watch a movie where it feels like, oh, they could have cut a ton of things, watch Ramayana, The Legend of Prince Rama, and sit through all 135 minutes without thinking, oh, they could have slimmed this thing down to like cut 15 minutes out entirely. Like, there's a right way of doing a lot with a story, and there's a wrong way of doing a lot. And I loved watching Ramayana, but still, like in context to Wendell and Wild, which played at the same festival, there's a difference.
I don't know. I kind of liked how overstuffed, air quotes, it felt, just because I think it lends itself really well to fans breaking it down or like dissecting every little thing, because there's just so much lore in the movie that's kind of just, this is how it works, and we're not going to explain it really. How are Hell Maidens chosen? What, was Manberg and Helly's relationship, mentor like relationship, before Kat ever showed up? How did the redemption chamber even get built? And I can't wait to really see people kind of break that stuff down or like make their own little fan theories and stuff.
I imagine this will be one of those movies that plays really well on multiple viewings, and I've seen your Letterboxd activity. You've seen this movie a handful of times. Were there any details that you picked up on, even as someone who's like seen how the sausage was made? Was there stuff on like your third or fourth viewing that you're like even still surprised you?
And this is kind of one, this is like an embarrassing one that's like, how did you not get that? Or maybe it isn't and it just felt that way to me, but I always thought the Bearza bubble was like a little strange. I was like, why is this thing pooping out a bubble? And then I was like, oh, it's Beelzebub up in the living world, but the underworld version of Beelzebub is the Beelzebub bubble. I was like, oh, those are the same characters. That makes sense. And this isn't necessarily like something I didn't notice in the story, but in the credits, and I'll let other people find it, Jack Skellington makes a cameo in the credits.
Was it in did he show up in the movie at all, or?
No, I think it was somebody on sets had like an actual head from Nightmare Before Christmas, like one of the actual puppet heads, and they like lent it to the movie to be in one of the credits shots, like that's rolling through. Did not even notice that Skellington head was in there until like the third viewing. And I was like, oh, cool. I didn't catch that at all. Another Easter egg that's in there, but it was one that I like knew about and I was actively looking for during the movie, is there's a marble bust of Henry Selick's head in the background of one of the shots, but I'll let people try to go find that themselves.
That's cool.
So, like, another thing I want to talk about is the music. Like, while they did have Bruno Coulais, who was a composer who's done like a lot of stuff, but most animation people would know him as the guy who helped out with Song of the Sea, Moon, Guardian of the Moon, Wolfwalkers, and 2018's White Fang. Another thing that they said like at the festival was that was very important was to get Afro-punk music and into the soundtrack. It definitely gives it like its own personality to the film and such, and a lot of really good tunes.
Speaking of personality, I think one of my favorite needle drops was Living Color's Cult of Personality.
Absolutely.
I hear that song a lot on the radio, but to hear it in like a mainstream animated feature, just it hits differently, you know?
I love seeing all the like user reviews on Letterboxd that are like, this is the best soundtrack of the year, it's so good, it's so cool.
I mean, it is like music matters, and I'm sure Henry and Peele fought very hard to get as many of these as possible, because I mean, that's from what I heard at the Q&A was that like there were a few that they couldn't get and they were bummed about it, but they were happy to get the ones that they could.
Yes, which speaking of, you can go listen to the Wendell and Wild official playlist right now on Spotify. TV on the radio, like themselves actually curated.
Oh, that's cool.
I liked even like some of the side characters. Also, like Miss Hunter, who brought Kat to the school.
Mm-hmm.
And she's voiced by Tantu Cardinal, who was also in the Oni Thunder God's Tales limited series also. Do you have like any fun stories that you can tell, like within reason, of course, because, you know, you don't want to break NDAs, people. You just don't want to.
Which is funny because like we got an email from Netflix, and I guess this is not something that's super normal. What, you know, from other people who've worked in the industry have told me, but Netflix kind of gave us an email that was like, yeah, if you have any set photos at all or anything that you know, took pictures of on set, fair game, post them all. When we were like, what? So if you, I'm sure if you go look at like hashtag Wendell and Wild, like on Instagram, there, the crew is, especially today and yesterday, you'll find a lot of crew photos and a lot of like behind the scenes stuff, because I guess it's just all able to post.
That's wild to me. I yeah, take a shot every time we say this is wild for Wendell Wild, because most of the times, if you broke that NDA, you are in trouble.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's why I was like, I had so many photos, but I was like so scared to ever like show anybody anything. But then that email came and it was like, yeah, post everything. Okay. Will do.
So what you're saying is Netflix isn't going to put a huge marketing campaign, but they will let the crew go hog wild.
Yeah, I guess I mean, I have a feeling that Wendell and Wild is going to be one of those word of mouth films, and probably will eventually bleed into the cult classic realm that Henry's films always kind of seem to do. But yeah, I think it'll do pretty well for itself just because it's a good movie and people seem to be talking about it.
I have a ton of moments that I love. The whole sequence when they first meet Kat in the dream sequence, and they're like, we can't raise the dead, but we can lie.
Oh,
good
yeah.
idea. And then, of course, the one that you said got the biggest reaction from a screening was when they thought they ate Kat, the animal thing ate Kat, and then just so nonchalantly.
Oh, they ate little Raoul too.
Delivery on that is just perfect.
Yeah, another one that like got a pretty big laugh, especially from like, because I took my family to go see the movie. My dad especially laughed at the part where they like step on the little bug for the first time and they figure out they can revive the dead, at least for a limited time. And then Wendell's like, oh, do it again. And they step on it again. Just like
that was the first teaser that we ever got for the film. I remember.
It's crazy. Because it appeared in my Facebook memories exactly 1 year ago yesterday, that teaser was released. So from that teaser that dropped, 1 year happened, and then the movie came out on Netflix that same day.
That's crazy.
Yeah, just like, I mean, their marketing was very interesting for this. They would just show you little clips and such, like out of context. And then like every once in a while, they show you like a longer clip. Mm-hmm. Right up until they showed you the teaser and then the official trailer.
There was a rumor going around that, like on set, that we weren't really getting a trailer and they were going to just continue to do that whole zoom into the boombox thing, like throughout the entire marketing. So it was pretty cool to see that teaser drop. And not only that, it was pretty cool to see the teaser drop and it be a really good teaser.
Yeah, that was a very awesome teaser. When I was in Washington for a wedding and the animation is filmed lineup was announced, like I was showing my father who goes with me to this festival, and we watched that teaser first, and I didn't see the teaser like at that point. So it was just my first time watching it with him. And it's just like, oh yeah, we got to watch this one. Mm-hmm. Which I'm glad we did, because that was the first film that's sold out at the festival. But no, it was interesting because I remember, from the teasers, there was the bug squishing. Then there was like a little sequence with the skeletons. Mm-hmm. And then another one with Kat sitting behind Raoul. Mm-hmm. And then the meteor clip was when they showed Kat going to get the teddy bear.
Oh, yeah. I guess to answer your earlier question, Michael, because you brought up the skeletons. I think the skeletons were probably some of my favorite side characters. Not only just because on screen I think they were funny and played well, but I spent a lot of time with them in the test units.
Oh,
So I got to see them kind of like evolve into what they became on screen. And so it was like pretty cool just to see a lot of that.
So like when you say test screen or like test room or what have you, would they like do like assuming like animation tests or design tests to see how they would look in motion and what have you and such?
Yeah,
or...
so the first process is how do they just look in general? So you'd take, a series of still photos from, a 360 degrees, and Henry would come in, look at them, see kind of how they read on camera, and then once those got approved after whatever notes needed to be addressed, they'd kind of move into the animation test units, and an animator would do sort of like a calisthenics test where it's like, this is the full range of what this puppet can do, so we can work within that sort of space. And then outside of that, it was a lot of testing, specific gags or specific motions, what the walk cycles themselves of the puppets would look like, how the coffins look on camera, and testing different ways for the skeletons to rise up out of the coffins and stuff. So a lot of stuff would get tested before it would make it onto the hero stages, because once they left the test units, it was like they should be good to go for the movie.
Was there ever a character that went through testing that never made it to the screen? Or was it just very much like what you see were everyone that they wanted?
Characters? No, I don't think so. I mean, outside of just like, at least in my time there, the biggest one was the eels weren't purple. They ended up being green in the end.
Well, that's interesting because I know sometimes in productions, like I know The Incredibles had a character during the whole plane sequence in the first film, but then they cut that out because they were like, we don't want to traumatize anyone.
Sure.
So
I think the biggest difference is like the puppets have to be approved as characters so far in advance because it takes so much time to make the puppets. So if you had a puppet that was made and then by the time it finally got made, you just wanted to cut it, something went wrong in production. A lot of the pre-production stuff has to be pretty well set in stone, not like 100% set in stone, but a lot of stuff has to be pretty finely tuned in the pre-pro before it actually gets to production. Otherwise, you're just wasting time, basically.
Well, I would assume so. But like, were these puppets like made with like a 3D printed like material, or was it like plasticine, or what kind of like material were?
I think it was a combination of a lot of that. I know they all had, just the metal armature inside, and then kind of were just built around. I'm not sure the exact materials a lot of the puppets were. I know a lot of them felt very rubbery.
It's always interesting when you look back at some of these stop motion stuff. Like I know Rake and Bass had mostly like wooden puppets, and they would have like just a lower jaw that was removable, which is why they always had those I forgot, some animator on YouTube called it like the Rankin Bass ooh face, because the upper lip wouldn't move but the bottom lip would, so you'd always get these like teardrop looking mouth movements and such.
Sure.
And then of course Aardman would use like a clay like substance like plasticine, move the characters, and you could see like the thumbprints if you look carefully enough on certain shots and such, which is cool to me. I love that kind of stuff because it's so textile. And that's interesting to note because I know you showed us a picture of like some of the face plates. And
yeah, that was crazy. The last day we were there, they all gave us like a random set of 4 faces from the movie.
That must have been so cool. I would have loved.
Had no idea that was going to be a crew gift. It was like, wait, we get to keep the faces?
I think I would have been speechless if I was told that. I was like, okay.
I'm pretty sure the faces, and like, I'm pretty sure the faces too are hand painted, which is just insane.
A lot of work goes into these things. It's impressive. And
the only one I have left is, now that you've gotten a taste of what it's like working in stop motion, what are some projects that you're looking forward to in the future? I know like stop motion isn't dying anytime soon. It feels like now there's a bit of a resurgence.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio is coming out. I'm excited to see that because that was the first film that I was on. I had interned on that for a little bit, only a few months before I actually got like hired on to Wendell. So it's funny that Wendell came out first. Currently, I'm at Leica Studios working on Wildwood, so that'll be fun. I know Aardman's finishing up Chicken Run 2. That'll be sweet. And then I know after that, they're working on a Wallace and Gromit feature, which will be pretty awesome to see Wallace and Gromit return to a feature film since the first time since Curse of the Were-Rabbit.
I think that's the one I'm kind of looking forward to the most, just because it has been so long.
The Leica one sounds so fascinating to me just because of its tone and that it's not fully family friendly.
There's a book. You can read Wildwood right now.
But that's just me because I'm just like, I'm always fascinated and looking for like, what's the next big or what's the next like non family friendly animated film to come out in? What is it going to be like? Is it going to be like The Summit of the Gods where it's stoic and atmospheric and very quiet? Or is it going to be something like Wendell and Wild where it's just got a lot of heavy subjects?
In terms of like stop motion or just animation in general that's not like directed specifically towards younger audiences, the one that's I have no idea really what it's going to be about, even, working at Leica, because it's just so in pre-production or so, only the higher ups really know about it. But The Night Gardener, because they announced that Leica's doing another movie called The Night Gardener, which is described as like a neo-noir.
Yeah, I remember reading about that. That's very cool.
And I'm like, I really want to be a part of that production.
I hope you get to be involved in that one.
Yeah, just do a thing where you periodically go by the executive's office and just be like, hey, can't wait to hear more about that movie. Bye.
Yeah.
Do that every day for like 6 months. And they're like, okay, do you want to work on this? Oh, why, I was just thinking about it.
Oh, who, me?
Yeah. No, this was really fun to hear about the productions. I mean, like, I have my review up. If y'all want to watch it, I'll link it to this article when we finally post this discussion. And
if you're on Instagram, or if you have Instagram, a good person to go look at, his name is Craig. He's one of the stop motion riggers that was on Wendell and Wild. His Instagram is Jazzmole, Jazzmole. He's been posting a lot of really good behind the scenes stuff of how a lot of the practical effects work. So there's some good stuff on there if you want to see behind the scenes.
It was a pleasure having you on here. Glad we got to go behind the scenes a little on this movie. This is honestly one of the best movies that I've seen this year. I hope everyone gets a chance to see it. Now, before we get out of here, Aaron, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me on Instagram at Adventures of Aaron, or on Letterboxd at Aaron's Reviews, or you can find my website, which is adventuresofaaron.wixsite.com.
And Cam, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Cam's Eye View. I have my own website called camseyeview.biz, where I review animated films and shows from around the world called The Other Side of Animation. I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/CamsEyeView, and that's where you can find me.
And you guys can find me on Twitter at CaptainK42. You can check Quick Thoughts on letterboxd.com/CoachK42. And you can follow Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and Twitter at Ren Pop Culture. You can also find us on YouTube, like Podchaser, on the Banana Eater, wherever you listen to podcasts, Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. You escape, so do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Animation. We will catch you guys later. Peace out.